can make the argument that if the personnel evaluation was better, we probably would have won some more games. So I don't want to take up too much of your time, my guy, but it's egregious. Mike McCarthy has caught these hands.
Listen, Carson Wentz is horrible. Remember how way back in the past we used to have a discussion of who the best quarterback from the 2016 draft class was? And Eagle fans had the audacity, the unmitigated gall to try to say that it was Carson Wentz. Clearly it's Dak Prescott. The last couple seasons has proven it's Prescott hands down. Philly fans don't like Carson Wentz. There's good reason. He's been abysmal this year. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you're looking for Pat, you're not going to find him. We're going to do this show solo today, so we're going to give you a little bit of a truncated pre-roll. Pat has some traveling to do, so apologies. He wants to let everybody know, of course, that he would much rather be here with you to talk about this thing of ours, this big, dumb team of ours, and try to figure out where we're going to go from here. So a lot has happened in the past week that we're going to cover in the show. But before that, you know how we do in the pre-roll. We chop it up, and I'm here by myself. So it's not going to be as long as normal, but there's still a lot to talk about. The LA Dodgers have won the MLB championship. Nobody cares. Nobody likes the Dodgers. Who cares? One thing to talk about was Justin Turner being out there without a mask, kissing the trophy, and then kneeling next to everybody. So hopefully we won't have a big outbreak when it comes to the Dodgers, but imagine spending all season in a bubble, being ruled out of the game, yet he had to leave the game and came back out to celebrate with no mask and everybody was around him. So we're never going to get through this if y'all don't start wearing your damn mask, y'all. Yeah, crazy times. Another crazy thing that I don't really want to spend time in the actual show talking about, but had somebody, and you know, Twitter, no matter which direction everything goes and everybody can be in agreement, there's always going to be that guy that jumps out there and says the contradicting position, the contradicting opinion. So we had one of those, and I don't want to talk about anybody specifically without a chance to defend themselves, so I'm not going to call anybody out by name. But there's an analyst, I should say, definitely a data analyst that basically called everybody that was looking for the Cowboys to retaliate at some level for the Andy Dalton hit, said that there was toxic masculinity. What? Come on, bro. Football is a violent sport. Offensive linemen are violent people. Their entire job, as Pat and I covered extensively last episode, is to defend the quarterback all the time, every time. In football, in the street, in a bar, in a shoe, it doesn't matter where it is, they're supposed to defend the quarterback. To try and say that it is toxic masculinity to expect people who are professionally violent to respond violently to somebody being violent to their guy outside of the rules of the game. John Bostic broke the rules of football, and he basically targeted Andy Dalton's head, knocked it off the platter. It is not out of the realm of being reasonable to expect the Cowboys offensive line to have reacted and to defend their guy. So, I don't know, that guy might be the toughest dude on his block, but I think he is completely, absolutely, unfathomably incorrect when he's saying that it's wrong for people to expect the Cowboys offensive line to have done something. Sure, caregivers, make sure Dalton's okay. But somebody in that group was supposed to have Dalton's back and go out there and try to fight John Bostic and catch a charge, really, for doing that to QB1. And they didn't do it. So they have to catch a fade for that. And he has to catch a fade for trying to put it on the public and the media and the fans for saying that we're wrong for calling out the Cowboys offensive line for not doing anything. That's ridiculous. Got to catch a fade. Got a big show without Pat. I know that you guys don't want to just look at me, as wonderful as that could be for everybody out there. We're going to bring in a guest host. Very excited about the guest host. Somebody that I value their opinion on football and some things specifically with the Cowboys. We're going to bring that in after we get going. Actually going to have that as part of the free show. For those who subscribe, you know that we do the free show on Fridays where we have, 20 to 30 minutes of free roll. So everybody can learn why they need to subscribe to this podcast. We thank you over and over again for subscribing. If you're on the $3 tier, bump that up to the $10 tier if you can afford it. So you can get these pre-rolls, this full video. And if you're in the $10 tier, you know what it is. We thank you immensely for supporting us as we've been rolling for these first 2 months. We're already on episode 17. That's so crazy. Episode 17 of the show. We're driving things. We're doing things. Again, not just my only podcast. I do the Cowboys Wire podcast. I have every Tuesday night, 7:20 p.m. on 105.3 The Fan. Central Time, of course. I have a spot with the Nosebleed guys. Thankful for them. Find the Cowboys Wire podcast every Thursday night. It's going to get published. We have the network of people that we bring on Cowboys Wire and let them put their shows out there so we can get them some more exposure. So we're doing some big things. We're very appreciative of this being the foundation, the flagship of our podcasting and video broadcasting that we do on Cowboys Wire. Obviously, Pat with CBS Sports. But we're very thankful for all of the support. So without further ado, let's get going, talk about week 8. And let's get this party started. All right. You are now rocking with the best, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for tuning in to another exciting and exhilarating episode of the Catch This Fade podcast. I am, of course, your host, KD Drummond. Find me on Twitter at KD Drummond NFL. Where's my man? My man, Pat. He's not with us. He's doing a little bit of traveling. Follow him still on Twitter at Voice of the Star. But Pat Walker is not going to be able to join us today, so he sends us regards. He wants to make sure that you guys know he's with us in spirit, and he understands if I, talk slick, if I talk trash. I don't really have anything to talk about because baseball season is over for everybody. And we're all in this thing of ours with this big, dumb team of the Dallas Cowboys, and we're trying to make it through. So what do we have for you guys today? Full show, full show. We're going to talk about the roster changes. A lot of action happening this week between trades, releases. We're going to get into that full blown. I have a guest that is going to be joining us. Very excited about this guest. The one and only Mr. Voch Lombardi is going to be joining us, talk a little bit of offensive line. After the free show is over, we're going to talk about the Eagles preview. DiNucci is going to be making his first start. Talk about the draft picks that the Cowboys have coming up. We're going to actually have the premiere of the 2020 rooting guide. So I know a lot of people were asking about that. It's a whole different rooting guide this year, but we're going to get into that, who we're rooting for in week 8. And then we're going to talk about the cap space. So let's go ahead and get that fired up with the moves that the Cowboys have made this week. First and foremost, QB2 is going to be out. It is not official as of the recording of this show, but Andy Dalton hasn't practiced all week, still in the concussion protocol. He is out, and that means that 7th-round pick DiNucci is going to be making his first career start. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about that later, but it opens up a lot of opportunities for evaluation and for what this season basically is. It's just been a roller coaster ride. So much hope to begin. All the injuries started piling up, and now we're on QB3. We're on offensive line 3, 4, 5. It's just been a very tough time injury-wise for the Dallas Cowboys. But with DiNucci taking over, it does give us something different to look forward to. We all know that Andy Dalton was a rental. He signed with the Cowboys after being a starter for a very long time in Cincinnati. He was not a good starter down the last stretch of the years of his career. They ended up with the number 1 pick. They have Joe Burrow because Andy Dalton was not getting it done. Now, Cincinnati isn't good just because they got Joe Burrow, but you can see the difference in how he can create in that offense compared to what Andy Dalton was doing. So he signed during the pandemic. He's a Texas native. He wanted to be closer to his family, and he took the opportunity because basically he thought it would be a chance to be able to prove that he can be a starting quarterback somewhere else in the league. I don't know if he did that. I don't know if what we've seen out of Andy Dalton, even with this truncated offensive line situation, if he proved to anybody that he's capable of leading a team moving forward. So for him, very tough to have gone through this concussion. We'll see whether or not he gets the job back based on the performance of DiNucci. And again, we'll talk about that more later, but very interesting storyline that has a possibility of developing. They're paying Dalton. He gets more money if he plays. That's a big deal when you're trying to save money. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But whether or not Andy Dalton is going to be a long-term player of the Cowboys. I don't think that's the case. I don't think anybody's considering that. The Cowboys did go out and sign Cooper Rush, who was formerly Dak Prescott's backup for several years. Signed him to the practice squad. I guess that should indicate to people that Cooper Rush Andy Dalton probably isn't going to be ready anytime soon. Last week, they signed Garrett Gilbert off of, I believe, the Browns practice squad to be QB4. So now they have QB5 in tow. Doesn't exude much confidence in the two guys that they've had throughout the offseason, but we'll see what it is based on Ben DiNucci's first start. Other changes. Daryl Worley has been released. Daryl Worley was picked on relentlessly at the cornerback position. There's a lot to talk about with the Cowboys and their wide receiver because and the cornerback. We expect Chidobe Awuzie to return in this game. Coming off of IR, he had a hamstring injury, suffered after week 2, been missing ever since. But when you look at the snap breakdown of the Cowboys cornerbacks, it's very interesting. Daryl Worley played a little bit at left cornerback when he before the injury started mounting, primarily played at right cornerback. And for somebody that they were talking about, they wanted him to play safety, he didn't play in the slot at all. He primarily has been playing right cornerback for the Cowboys. Now, Anthony Brown played all 3 positions. You know, he had formerly played in the slot before, but he has played boundary corner. And before he was out with his rib injury, he played all 3 positions in week 1. He played left, he played right, he played slot. Since he's come back, he's primarily played on the boundary. He's played left and right corner, partially because of how everybody else was out. Chidobe Awuzie, before he got injured, he played one game, every single snap was left cornerback, and then the next game, every single snap was at right cornerback because Brown was out. Trevon Diggs, he has played left corner all season. Then the last 2 games, he's played right corner. And he did a little bit of traveling this past week because the only threat that Washington had was really Terry McLaurin. But he played both this past week. The interesting thing is that neither Awuzie or Diggs has played any time in the slot. Anthony Brown hasn't returned to the slot. Jordan Lewis has been playing the slot. You know he's not getting much boundary snaps. He hasn't really been playing well at all. But it'll be interesting to see how the Cowboys break down the snap distribution at cornerback moving forward because the Cowboys have a lot of players that are free agents. Worley's out. Brown is signed for a couple years. Diggs is signed for 4 years. This is, rookie season, second-round draft pick. But Jordan Lewis and Chidobe Awuzie are both free agents. So how they play these guys moving forward will be a telltale sign. There's 1 week left before the trade deadline. And yes, teams are definitely trying to get their trades in place now so that players will be available for week 9. Because of COVID requirements, you have to have basically 5 to 6 days of testing and all that kind of stuff before you can suit up. But it's a big question of how the Cowboys are going to distribute these snaps between Awuzie, Diggs, and Brown, who are all basically looked at as boundary corners. I've made the point. I wrote the article, the trade primer. Trade them or drop them, I think is how I phrased the title. But the Cowboys could be looking to trade Awuzie, Lewis, or even safety Xavier Woods, based on the fact that they're all free agents coming up in the next year. So if you lose a guy in free agency, you hope to get a compensatory pick. None of these guys are going to command big money. If they get a comp pick, it's going to be a 5th or a 6th. That's not going to happen until 2022. So if you're not going to win anything this year, why not trade a guy, see if you can get a late-round pick now, get the rewards early. Plus, the comp pick has a whole formula. If you lose a guy and you sign a guy, you don't get the comp pick. So just because you lose a guy in free agency doesn't mean that you're going to get a comp pick. Now, we'll talk about comp picks a little bit later. But the Cowboys still have some decisions to make when it comes to how they're going to rotate these quarterbacks. At this point, if it's a lost season, I did say if it's a lost season, then there's no point in really trying to trot out the best guys. Of course, we don't condone tanking. We'll talk about them when we talk about the rooting guide. But it doesn't mean that you have to do things under the guise of trying to win for the season. You try to win the games, but you don't have to be doing everything under the mantle of we need to be prepared for the playoffs so that we can go in there and win a championship. That ship has sailed, in my opinion. I know everybody doesn't agree, but in my opinion, that ship has sailed. So now you focus on other things. You can focus on winning individual games, but more so you worry about how your team is going to look moving forward. So what else has happened? Everson Griffin trade. He's gone to the Lions for a conditional 5th or 6th round pick. That opens up the door for guys to get some snaps at the defensive end position. Randy Gregory is back. He only played 6 snaps in this game. Bradley Anai, 5th round pick, wasn't even active. Dorrance Armstrong has a chance to get some more snaps, and that kind of seems to be the one that everybody is toting as being the next in line, the guy that's going to reap the most benefits of Everson Griffin being out of here. Don't know why. Now, I have nothing against Dorrance Armstrong. He's never really shown much in his limited opportunities, but he's had a lot more opportunities than the other guys. Pro Football Focus runs a metric called pass rush productivity. And whatever you have to say about PFF and their grades, which are subjective, their objectivity is very strong. And PRP is basically a formula that says if you take quarterback pressures, hits, and sacks and hurries, and it's a weighted formula, sacks are more important, you can grade how well people do as far as getting past their blocker and causing disruption for the offense, for the opposing offense. Out of all of the Cowboys edge rushers, Dorrance Armstrong has the lowest pass rush productivity. He has a 5.0. And he doesn't have a lot of chances. He has maybe 50 or 60 pass rush opportunities so far in this season, but far more than Bradley Anai, obviously far more than Randy Gregory. He has a 5. Gregory got just 1 rush snap in the game against Washington, had a quarterback hurry. Bradley Anai has just 3 rush opportunities on the season. He has a quarterback hit. So those guys are, obviously small sample size, but they're really the ones that deserve to get more work and hopefully to be more fruitful than Armstrong. So that brings into question something that we've talked about, and we faded Mike McCarthy for this several times about the coaching staff that he's put together. Are these position coaches evaluating players properly so that we know what we're supposed to be looking forward to? They never played Connor McGovern. Connor McGovern comes in. He looks pretty good. Kyler Badass, he had to wait for Joe Looney to get injured. The play of the line improves. Terrence Steele was given the nod over Cam Irving and over Brandon Knight. We see what Terrence Steele is. The question is whether or not these position coaches are making the proper evaluations in practice that are leading to these guys getting the opportunities that they're getting. So maybe Anai doesn't have all of the pro level knowledge necessary to make a difference. Randy Gregory certainly does. So let's see these guys. I hope that they're not going to keep better performing players on the bench just because of what they thought coming into the situation. We hope that's the case. Griffin being traded frees up 40 snaps a game that's going to need to be distributed amongst these guys. So Armstrong was already seeing 20 to 25 snaps a game. It'll be very interesting to see how they divide up these other 40 snaps. Maybe you give Randy Gregory Armstrong's 20 to 25. You bump Armstrong up to 30 since they seem intent on giving him more opportunity. And Bradley Anai starts to get some snaps, 15 to 20 snaps a game. Maybe that's how they're going to end up distributed, so it'll be very interesting. Also on the defensive line, and the reason that the quality defensive ends that the Cowboys haven't been getting the impact that you would expect is because the Cowboys were getting nothing up the middle. Dontari Poe is now cut. I've said multiple occasions, I didn't know if the Cowboys were going to have the stones to cut Poe because of the corner that Jerry Jones painted himself in when it came to the silent protests for social justice that were occurring during the anthem. Poe is the only player on the Cowboys that has done that. And Jerry Jones made it very clear back in 2017 that he was not going to stand for that. Now, he relented somewhat because of the times when he had to make a decision on that, when he was finally pressed. It was fresh in everybody's head how the NFL got everything wrong there. That doesn't necessarily mean that Jerry Jones changed his mind on the situation. I do not think that Dontari Poe was cut because of his anthem protest. But what I was saying is that I felt that it made the decision for Jones more difficult because one can clearly draw that line and bring this conversation back up during this time because of that. And Peter King did that. He brought up the question. I believe somebody asked him, Jerry Jones, in an interview, and he basically said that Poe was cut because he got fat. He didn't adhere to the weight clauses that were in his contract, the weight bonus clauses that were in his contract, and that he was basically out of shape to be the big, fat, ugly in the middle. And, you know, that's said with the term of endearment. But that's what the nose tackle in this defense was supposed to be. He was supposed to be a space filler. He did not fill space. He filled space physically, but not when it came to stopping the run. So no problem with them releasing Dontari Poe. But I was surprised that they did that. But they did it in the midst of cleaning house. He wasn't the first guy to go. They had traded Griffin. They cut him along with Worley. So I think that they mitigated some of that potential public relation damage that could have occurred from that situation. But again, it's still interesting, the dynamics of how all of that played out. Aldon Smith and Demarcus Lawrence are both top 25 in pass rush productivity for edge rushers in the NFL. The reason that they're not having great seasons is because when they get pressure, it doesn't always happen at the same time, and quarterbacks are able to step up without much problem. There's nothing in the middle. Not only was Poe and the other three techs that have taken over for Gerald McCoy, not only have they not gotten pushed in the run game, they're not getting pushed in pass rush, and it suffers when you have edge guys and the quarterback can just step up and still get all the time he needs in the world to find receivers downfield. So it will be interesting to see how Neville Gallimore and Justin Hamilton improve on the level of play. Antoine Woods is still in the mix. It'll be interesting to see what happens now that Poe's 30 to 35 snaps that he's been getting, now that that's going to other people. Are there any other moves coming? Again, I referenced earlier that the Cowboys secondary has a lot of guys that are on one-year contracts, so we'll see if any of those guys are jettisoned. I don't think that they're going to make any major moves. In my trade guide, I basically said that the only big-name player that makes any sense whatsoever, and not something that I would condone, but the only one that makes any sense of trading would be Amari Cooper, because he was only signed to a $10 million signing bonus. So the acceleration of that money into the cap isn't as bad as if you were looking to trade somebody like Jalen Smith or Ezekiel Elliott or any other big name guys. Tank Lawrence is impossible to trade. They restructured his contract. But you're not going to get rid of any of the other guys that people would, some people, very small selection, a loud minority, would like to see jettisoned from this team. The Elliott contract is what it is. The Jalen Smith contract is what it is. There's a chance that you can move away from Jalen if you're that frustrated with him. That seems to me like more like an off-season trade to get the maximum value for him. I don't see that happening. But Amari Cooper, you could see them moving on from him. But why would you weaken the only strength if the entire point of the game of football in 2020 is passing offense? Why would you give up a strength like what the Cowboys have in their receivers? Michael Gallup isn't getting traded. Shut up. Stop it. He's too cheap. He's too good and he's too cheap. You're not trading Michael Gallup because you're not going to get anything above a third-round pick for him, and that's what you spent. So why would you do that? Why would you do that just to have to go draft another third-round wide receiver and hope that he's as good as Michael Gallup? Come on, bro. Think about it. All right, so that's the state of the roster right now. It's crazy that I do a roster guide every week because there's so much change. There's so much turnover. But now it's time to focus on what the Cowboys are doing at the offensive line. And I am not an offensive line guru. I have my opinions, but I decided to get some help and bring in an actual offensive line guru. So it is my pleasure to bring you the interview that I did a little bit earlier today with YouTube sensation, the one and only Mr. Voch Lombardi.